Hey, comic fans, thank you so much for joining us. Dave here at Ground Zero, talking all things comics and all things comics history. Now, in looking for a topic for today, I came across this message from Kevin McCarley, who writes, "Hey, what's the deal with Power Girl? Is she from Krypton? Is she Superman's cousin? Wasn't she originally from Earth too?" Well, Kevin, thank you so much for lobbing an idea our way. And I really hope you're doing well through all of this. The answer to all three of your questions is yes. And actually, then it's no. And then it turns out to be yes again, because this is DC Comics we're talking about, and no continuity is ever in a straight line at DC. But we're going to do our best to sort it out at least a little bit in this segment of Interestingly Enough. Now, as I all too often do, I'm going to go back a ways. In fact, all the way back to 1961, but don't worry, I'm going to skip right through this. If you remember from an earlier video, in September of 1961, Gardner Fox wrote the classic story, The Flash of Two Worlds. And it was in this story that introduced the concept of an alternate Earth, one where the classic heroes of the Golden Age still resided, still fought crime, but also grew older, married, had children, all the things normal people do, just with a cape and in spandex. Well, this was a groundbreaking concept, one that was popular with fans and readers, and so of course, it was a concept they were going to revisit, and they did. In Justice League number 21, August of 1963, Gardner Fox again reintroduces you to the Justice Society of America. Now, this was their first appearance since March of 1951. They'd been gone for over a decade, which back in the 1960s was a longer period of time than it is today. Now, this was so popular that they revisited it again and had the JLA and JSA cross over. And then they did it yet again. In fact, it was so popular that it became an annual event at DC. Fans very much look forward to the annual summer JLA JSA crossover. And DC thought, if they look forward to this that much, maybe we should give them Justice Society on a regular basis. So Roy Thomas, one of the editors at the time over there, suggested to his friend Jerry Conway, how about if you write this book we're going to come up with? Because we're going to revive the classic All-Star Comics title and bring back the Justice Society. Well, Jerry Conway was all too happy. He was now at DC, which he really enjoyed because he didn't get so many death threats. Mostly because not as many people read DC Comics back then. And if they did, they weren't nearly as serious about them as Marvel fans. Well, there they had it, and they knew they were going to have the characters like Wildcat and Dr. Fate and Mr. Terrific, characters that were unique to the Earth 2 universe. But one thing they did not want to have was the Golden Age Superman, because they didn't want kids confused by an older Superman in one book and then a younger modern Superman in another. So that was easy enough to do. They already had Superman in several books at the time. So they needed a character that was going to be the mighty character, somebody strong. Without him, they needed somebody that could plug a volcano when a volcano needed plugging. And this is comics. Volcanoes often need plugging in comics. So they looked at their lineup and realized there was one thing that really stood out about it. It was all guys. It was 100% testosterone, 100% male. So what if we come up and fill the mightiest, strongest member of the team with a female? This was great. This was a very progressive move for a company that was not known for progressive moves. Well, they had to come up with the visual look of this now soon-to-be very important character. Well, one of their two artists was Wally Wood. Now, Wally Wood is one of the all-time greats in comics. He is an absolute legend. He worked on the classic EC line of comics in the 1950s, doing especially science fiction work for weird science and weird fantasy. Amazing work throughout the company, including the work from Wally Wood. But now, an interesting thing happened between his work for EC in the 50s and his move to DC in the 70s, and that was he spent a fair amount of time working for the military. He drew comic strips for the military newspapers, strips like Cannon and Sally Forth. Well, since these magazines were aimed exclusively at GIs, it was encouraged that these strips be kind of racy. And so they had buxom women, they had a reasonable amount of nudity, and Wally Wood became very adept at good girl art. It was something he became known for. So when it was time to design and draw Power Girl in these books, this is what they came up with. A white leotard, a red cape, blue gloves, and a circular cutout prominently displaying her womanly values. Well, fair enough. They did the best they could with what they had. Now, Jerry Conway was determined to make this much more like a Marvel book, which is to say the characters didn't really get along all that well. They squabbled, they fought, they would get mad and storm off and leave the team when things didn't go their way. Well, so what about Power Girl? Who was she? Well, from the very get-go, the very first appearance of her, she explains to the other members of the Justice Society that she is from the planet Krypton, rocketed to Earth when she was very young by her father, who sent her away from the doomed planet, and she landed on the same planet as her cousin, who you might be a little more familiar with, and you know him as Superman. So she was Superman's cousin. She was the Supergirl of Earth 2. But Jerry Conway wanted his characters to be unique. He didn't want to just rewrite the characters that existed in other books. And so he made sure that her personality was very different from the Supergirl that was appearing in other comics. He made her feisty, gave her kind of a combative attitude. He was all too aware of the women's lib movement of the mid-70s, and so he wanted to make her something resembling a feminist kind of hero, just with a peekaboo cutout where male heroes get a cool logo. So they had their book, they had their costume, they had just about everything, and the book trucked along pretty well for about a year. Then into the picture comes Jeanette Kahn. Now, Jeanette Kahn took over DC's line of comics as publisher and did a lot of great and much needed things. And one of those was she took one look at Power Girl's costume and said, guys, come on, really? No. You've got to lose the sunroof. So they came up with this, which was really exactly the same costume, just without the circular cutout. In fact, probably all they did was erase the lines, because let's face it, all of this is just lines on paper. But either way, this is what we got for a while. But since the book was drawn by male artists month in and month out, what they did was they started lowering the neckline, and it got progressively lower and lower until eventually we had the almost full return of the Kryptonian Gorge. Now, she was such a popular character that she got her own feature in DC's Showcase series. You can see that neckline going lower and lower and lower. Massive blue gloves, striking red cape. She had it all. And for 3 issues, we not only get an adventure of her, but we get more of her origin, which still is essentially the Supergirl of Earth 2. But either way, she was popular and fans loved her. Now, of course, all those fans were male. Well, All-Star Comics trucked along very well for a few years. But in June of 1978, we talked about it just last segment, the DC implosion came along. The DC implosion saw a bloodbath and a lot of titles get canceled. And one of them was the Justice Society. So now she didn't even have her own book, but she guest starred in a number of books for a few years. But something even worse than the cancellation of her book was about to happen. And that was in 1985. Crisis. We all remember Crisis on Infinite Earths, a landmark book that changed the DC universe forever. And what happened at the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths? There was no more Infinite Earths. That means there was no Earth 2. There was no place for her to even exist. This could easily have been the end of Power Girl. But DC knew a popular thing when they had one. And did I mention their audience was almost exclusively male? So they were going to keep Power Girl alive. Well, what they did then was they retconned her origin, because she couldn't be from Krypton. She couldn't be from Earth 2. So what to do? Well, if she can't be Kryptonian, hey, the next best thing is bound to be Atlantean, surely. Just go with it for a minute. So they decided to make her the granddaughter of Arion, Lord of Atlantis. Yeah, I know, you don't remember Arion. Nobody remembers Arion. But he had his own book in the 80s, and DC thought he'd be a thing. Who knew? Well, either way, they wanted to make him a more important character by making him Power Girl's grandfather. And of course, the fact that he existed thousands of years before the setting that we were currently reading in DC Comics at the time was also insignificant because, hey, she spent a millennia in suspended animation. I mean, sure, why not? Because there we are. Well, hard to believe, but she actually didn't know much about her Atlantean heritage. So she went to another book far removed from where she should have been ever in the first place, and that was the Book of Warlord. Warlord takes place in Scartaris, a world inside the Hollow Earth, but it was basically colonized by Atlanteans. So Power Girl goes to Scartaris to learn more about her Atlantean heritage. Thank goodness, because nothing is worse than a hero that doesn't know her own Atlantean heritage. Well, okay, either way. They were trying. They really were trying everything they could. And they even gave her her own miniseries. Now, this is probably most notable for the fact that it shows a noticeable decrease in her real estate portfolio, to put it nicely. And oddly enough, it wasn't nearly as popular as most of her other stuff had been. To this day, no one knows why. Well, okay, was she going to fade away, destined to be nothing but bit parts as a supporting character in other people's comics? Well, hopefully this was all temporary, and she returned to doing what she did fairly well, and that was bring massive scoops of heroism to super teams. And so she did, although admittedly second-rate teams like Justice League Europe. But that was her fate for a number of years. What they had to do was get her back to being the character that everybody had loved. Well, if a crisis can get them into this mess, then by golly, they can just use a crisis to get them out. And so that's where we get back to Infinite Crisis. And you'll notice the interdimensional ravine is as robust now as ever. And it's in this book that she finds out, no, she's not Atlantean, she's Kryptonian. Didn't we know this all along? Of course, she just thought she was Atlantean because why not? Come on, it's comics, just get over it. I mean, you know. Anyway, so now she is Kryptonian. And now we can actually start getting some good books with Power Girl in them. Kind of like Kylie Minogue after her one Serious album. She just decided, this is who I am, and let's just have fun with it. No more apologizing for who she was. So now she's back to being the bulbous exemplar of Krypton that she was really meant to be. And we start getting things like Justice Society of America by Jeff Johns. This was a fantastic comic. And honestly, she becomes a great character. These books are well worth reading. I'll definitely be recommending them. And she's much more than just a pretty face and that really obnoxious peekaboo cutout. She is a three-dimensional character that you really love for reasons that aren't right smack dab up front. Honestly, truly a great series. And through all of that, it went further because she becomes popular enough to get her own series by Justin Gray, Jimmy Palmiotti, and Amanda Connor. And they bring a sort of widescreen fun to the series that certainly was what this character needed. Now, that brings us pretty close to where we're at now, and I hope this sort of sorts it out. Needless to say, you just have to sort of go with whatever the setting is at any particular time because she's been around long enough that it changes. Now, if you're looking for something good to read that's got Power Girl in it, well, if you like classic comics, this is the book you need. This collects almost the entire run through that period of All-Star Comics with the Super Squad, because they were going to call it the Super Squad instead of the Justice Society of America because it's the 70s and surely nobody wants the Justice Society of America. Except they were wrong. People wanted the Justice Society of America, not the Super Squad. But either way, it's all here, including a lot of early Power Girl appearances, as well as the death of Batman and Huntress and all sorts of cool things. Again, if you like 70s era stuff, just be sure that's what you like, because this is very 70s. But it's good stuff for what it is. Now, I think I'm going to recommend much more highly Jeff Johns' run on JSA. Honestly, Jeff Johns is a great writer who gets under the skin of characters, even if their skin is rocky or green or purple or on fire. Jeff Johns is good at that kind of thing, and he did really good work here. It's a long run. It will keep you reading for a while. But if you like Power Girl and want to see her as something three-dimensional, just not in the three-dimensional way, this is the book you need to read. Now, she's also popped up with Harley Quinn and all sorts of other books. So she's out there in lots of different things. Buyer beware. She is what she is. Sometimes writers do great work with her. Sometimes they only see her for the superficial package. Okay, well, I hope that sorts out Power Girl at least a little bit for some of you guys. Now, this makes 15 videos in 16 days. From this point on, we're actually going to cut the frequency back a little bit to keep me from completely burning myself out, and also to keep you guys from getting completely burned out on watching me. So we're going to cut it back to probably about 3 times a week. Maybe we'll fall into a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. That'll give me a little more time to research these things and answer your questions. Guys, please, please keep watching. Just because I'm going to cut it back just a little bit, don't forget the 3 S's: like, subscribe, and share. That is actually really important. And if you have questions, I will try to answer every question I can. If there's other topics you have that you want me to broach, by all means, send them my way. We love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please, while we're still in our self-isolation, take care of yourself. Do it. Take advantage of it while it's happening. That's what we'll be doing here, and trying to make Ground Zero better for when people are finally returning. So either way, we'll be thinking of you. Please stay in touch because we want to hear how you're doing. And that's all we got for today. Guys, have a great day. Read some comics while you're at it.